morning, ladies. It's an absolute honor for me to be up here to talk with you about investing in women and investing in women-led innovation. And I would like to start our panel with a little piece of data. There's been a lot of talk about data in this forum. It's fantastic. And it's a data that is very close to my heart because it has to do with investing in media organizations. I am the co-founder of a media organization in my country, Costa Rica, funded and powered by women. And what it says, the studies say that in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, around 30% of the new native digital media is being funded by women, in contrast to the 1% of the more traditional older media. And this is great news for the news. Nonetheless, the same studies show that these media organizations are making 4 times less revenue than media organizations led by men. And one of the key roles for this disparity has to do with investment in seed and growth on this media. There's a lot less investment. And I have to say that they are fools because they don't know what they're missing. But in that note, I would like to start with ACES. And I would like to know, in the tech world, do you see something different?
Wonderful to be here, and thank you. I wish I could say I could see something different, but unfortunately, that's also true in the tech sector. So I focus mostly on Africa. I'm based in Nairobi, and I've worked in the tech sector last 15 years, and I've seen just the trajectory. So there's been just huge transformation, so much innovation. Africa, particularly Kenya, has been put on the map in terms of mobile innovation and fintech. But over that time, I would say probably greater than 90% of the capital that's gone into early stage companies has gone to male-founded startups. And so women have been looking for capital, not getting the amount of capital they're seeking. And I think a lot of the challenge, I mean, there's a number of reasons, but I think part of the challenge that's talked about a lot today has been a lot of the bias in terms of how deals are looked at. So typically looking for high growth, growth at all costs, and the unicorn story is it's the same culture from Silicon Valley that's come to Silicon Savannah. And so women are kind of not telling that big story, and they're not seeing as like venture backable. So that's kind of the dynamics happening there. It's one primary reason. And the other one that's really big that we talk a lot about is, we talked many times at the conference today, the pipeline issue. And so the networks into capital are very gendered. Most of the capital that comes into the continent is from outside of the continent, mostly US, but of Asia and Europe. So that means that they're just that access to capital through these mostly male networks. Women have these smaller female networks that don't have that kind of capital. So in the end, you end up with just smaller businesses, and not for lack of women trying to actually get the kind of capital to grow. Yeah.
That strikes me when we think about smaller women networks, and I think that's why the space that we're at is so important to actually grow those networks. Anna, how about in the US? Do you see something different in terms of investing in women-led organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think many of the challenges that Isis talked about are definitely present still in the US. But I'd like to balance some of the positivity with some of the negativity, and also focus on how much progress we have made. I think the number that people tend to focus on is kind of what I call the 2%, which is the share of capital that goes to solely women-founded businesses. And when you look at that, that number hasn't moved in a decade. It's similar in the US, it's similar in the UK, and in many places in the world. But when you try to break that down and look at the metrics a little bit differently and say, well, actually, why don't we look at how many companies, and what share of funding they got that had at least one female founder. And there we're seeing massive movement, like the landscape's completely changing. So I think we were something like 13%, about a decade ago. We're up at 21% today, and that's not only the share of capital that's going to companies that have at least one female founder, but also the pie is growing. And so if you look at the total deal value, that number has tripled almost in the last decade. So I think that's a pretty positive story. That doesn't mean that the pipeline isn't, sometimes missing. That doesn't mean that the network issues aren't there. But I think overall, we are seeing the light, and then I think also there's many entrepreneurs, some who are here. I'm going to point one out in a second, that are helping support that change. So Shelley Porges is here. I'm sure you're going to be swamped later. She's the co-founder of Beyond the Billion, which is one of the largest. It's one of the largest. Consortiums where they've put together a number of venture capital funds specifically to invest in women, and they already, I think, have 17 unicorns, if my numbers are right, which is incredible. And I think those sorts of things really change the ball game, and we need to get more of those, and we need to kind of create the pathways for women to have access to that on an ongoing basis. So I think a little bit of positivity.
No, and it's amazing to hear that. What's actually turning the needle has to do with more equity, right? Like bringing a more diverse group of people into leadership, right? And of course, we want to see a lot more money being given to women-led only by women, companies led only by women, but we also would like to have that, same level for groups that are diverse. So I think that's
absolutely, and across many industries, right? I mean, you mentioned media; it's a very difficult industry. If you look at the U.S., the majority of editors are male, and I think over 90% are white male. At that point, it's going to be very difficult for women to crack that.
Now, Kira, your country is and has been for a while in a very aggressive war. What do you see there when it comes to women leadership and innovation in such a horrible environment?
Hello, and it's such a pleasure and privilege to be here and to represent my country. And indeed, going through an incredible dark times, incredibly tough times, I want to say that we are using it the best way possible for the opportunity of women leaders to raise up, to get more powers. I will tell you it from two sides, like from business side and also from the political side, because it's fascinating actually how women are doing in Ukraine right now. So from the business side, what we have seen that over this like almost 3 years of full-scale invasion, women has increased their share in the businesses up to 43% of all businesses. And I think it's pretty amazing. And it was not only because they had to replace men who went to fight at the war, but also because they were opening new businesses by themselves. So like last year, 43,000 private entrepreneurs were women and who opened their own small private entrepreneurial organizations. And I'm so proud of them because like every year we are working on different programs and processes that would require women to come, get trained, and then go ahead and have their small businesses opened. And every single year, we have no lack of women applying to that. And this is pretty amazing because I think like next year and the year after, there would be more and more saying, well, I have to take a responsibility for myself. And I would rather go and start something new, fantastic, digitalized. And they, I enjoy talking to them because they say, I want to make it right from start. I want to do it the best and the most progressive way. And so we will continue working and investing from the governmental side, and we are so thankful to our partners who are helping us to do that. But there is another side, and it is a political side. So I'm a leader of a small party, which is called Holos Voice. It is the smallest party in Ukrainian parliament, and at the last elections in 2020, we have gotten 350 mandates on the local level. And the majority of those mandates were women. And they were always in the minority when it would be like one woman of 20, active woman, first-time politician saying, I will change something. And then, at the time, they got very much demotivated. And then after full-scale invasion, the local council started to change as well. Because men went to fight, and they started being not one of 20, but one of 6 or one of 7, which is a completely different situation. And we know it from the political side, right? And so these women started feeling what the power is and like how to really be the part of the organization. And throughout those 3 years, I see them growing as young politicians, getting more and more energy, resources, understanding where they're using this tragic time as an opportunity for themselves. And fighting for the same thing that this forum is fighting, the equal pay and the equal opportunities that we need to get and we are getting.
That's amazing. We talked about this earlier, how this is something that has happened throughout history, right? Men have to go and fight for freedom, and then the women stay home and fight as well.
You know, it's said that the wars are won by men and the countries are rebuilt by women. Well, we will change that because there are many women who are fighting at war right now in Ukraine, but there are many women who are helping so that it will be much easier to rebuild.
Exactly. Wonderful. That's wonderful. Now, Eileen, let's talk about the bigger picture, right? What, from the perspective of the well-being economy, what is at the root of this inequality and disparities when it comes to investment in women?
Well, thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here this morning and to be on this panel with some really amazing women, so thank you for the opportunity. Well, the root cause, lies in women who are trying to succeed within economic systems that are built on non-feminist values, and values that are exploitative, extractive, and degenerative, and that promote the relentless pursuit of GDP growth at all costs and short-term profit maximisation over long-term societal well-being. Now, our current system, it systematically undervalues the various sort of activities and approaches that are traditionally associated with women, such as care, and that's because, the system is misaligned with our values and our human needs. And it's very much, it's counting the wrong things, it's valuing the wrong things, and it's focusing on narrow definitions of productivity. So we need to go beyond the incremental change and focus on the system, because that's where the greatest leverage is. Now, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, we are working to fundamentally redesign our economic systems so that they centre care for human and environmental well-being in line with feminist values, and they work in service of what people and planet need. Now, this is not just utopian or theoretical, but it is an agenda that is actually being led by women leaders around the world, and who are already demonstrating how economic systems can be redesigned. Now, the Wellbeing Economy Government's Partnership, which was initiated in 2018 by former female leaders in Scotland, like Nicola Sturgeon, here in Iceland with Catherine Jakobsdottir, and in New Zealand with Jacinda Ardern, they've showed how governments can move beyond GDP to put well-being at the heart of economic policy. And, these leaders, they understood that measuring what really matters changes what gets valued and supported. And similarly, when it comes to businesses, social enterprises, they embody the wellbeing economy. And they tend to demonstrate, sort of better gender balance in leadership, but not enough is being done at the moment to ensure that they can thrive. 1 in 2 social enterprises worldwide are led by women, compared to 1 in 5 for conventional enterprises. So making social enterprises thrive and become mainstream would be a huge step forward for both gender equality and also for well-being economies.
That's social enterprises thrive. We need more of that. And all of that you say also brings me back to, our original people and all of our native people in the world that also have this vision that we also embody as women. And I think that's fantastic. But from a solutions journalism practitioner, we have laid out the problem. We know what's wrong. So what can we do from our different fields to change this and to really push for more investment in women-led and women innovation? So I don't know if, Eileen, you want to take it from what you were saying just now about, changing the way we see growth and economic growth.
Yeah, ensuring, I think, the equitable distribution of economic power by extending democratic principles into our economy, including our businesses, that is really important for well-being economies. So purpose-driven businesses like social enterprises, cooperatives, and employee-owned businesses, they are a key part in building economic democracy. And so, when the trouble is they're often small scale, and they lack access to proper finance. But in Scotland, our government recognises the potential. So our government is aiming to dramatically scale up and triple the number of these types of businesses, increasing their finance and making them more mainstream into our economic policy and practice. And this would automatically increase women's participation and increasing financing, and also would be a game changer for advancing well-being economies. And we're seeing, similar kinds of shifts in this type of approach, in the parts of the world. But, there's much, much more needs to happen in this space on a larger scale, because, where we are at the moment, we're going backwards, and we heard that yesterday, where, the power and control of our economy is increasingly now lies in the hands of the wealthiest few. And we have to challenge this. We have to call it out and not just accept that these are the rules and these are the economic structures that we have to live with. And so we really absolutely need to talk about the economy and talk about our economic system, because if you're in government, that's about rethinking the purpose of economic policy. If you're in business, it's about rethinking purpose, ownership, and governance of who's involved in taking those decisions and those investment decisions. But we need everybody on board to be able to do this.
And I mean, coming from the government, I'm pretty sure you have a lot to say in that line, Kira. And I mean, you already talked about how Ukrainian government is actually putting a lot into the women that are leading the economy right now.
But what do we need to do so that in 5 years we will still be able to invest in women, right? In 10 years. And Monica, I was giving it a lot of thought, and there is only one answer, right? Is to ensure equal representation. So in 10 years, the women who are right now in school will get elected or be able to get the support from their government so that they can develop and open businesses in their own country. And so it's not a simple answer. It's a complicated solution that we will need to set together. And right now we are investing our time in making sure that the women who will want to participate in active politics in Ukraine will have enough trainings right now while there are no elections. They will have to get enough of the skills and mentorship and understanding of how the system works. So when the time comes, they will be ready, and they will accumulate enough of the resources so they can step up. Our parliament right now, we don't have elections in Ukraine because of the martial law, but this parliament is unique because we have 20% of women. It's unbelievable representation in Ukraine. The previous parliament was only having 8%. So it's already, was a breaking news, but the next one needs to be different, needs to be better. And we all need to work right now to make sure that we are setting the stones so that will happen. Because I really hope that in the foreseeable future, we will win the war and we will be able to have a normal political situation. And we know that after the wars, it's usually not women who are coming to power, right? And we will need to change that. And again, what we have seen was lacking, and what we all, I'm sure in this room, silently know that the only good thing that is working is a mentorship, is being an example, is having role models throughout the country in different organizations, in different areas, so that people, and women would know that it's possible, that there are women who would help them, and there are women who will be able to advise them. So there is a huge amount of work in front of us, but it's a challenge that we are glad to have, because it's for the good cause, right? And I hope that the next time we will meet about this, we will be able to show some progress.
That's great. Anna, role models, mentorship, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think, as any woman here would know, having role models and having the right mentors is probably what got us to this room in the first place. I think more broadly, ideas to leave us with, just building on what Kira said, I think representation is huge, and not just in politics. But if we don't get more female investors, we will not relate, or they will not relate in the same way to potential female entrepreneurs, and we will not fix the pipeline issues and the investment issues that we talked about earlier. For me, I like to bet on our youth. And I think we have to bet on our youth for the future. They are what I call the most generation. If you look at Generation Z and Generation Alpha that are coming in, they're the most globally connected, they're the most digitally savvy, they're the most educated, they're the most diverse, and you can just kind of keep going. And when you look at, I kind of study how humans are changing through generations. And what we're seeing now is that they fundamentally value different things in leaders. They want leaders who have their backgrounds, who look like them. They're putting emotional intelligence in the top 2 qualities that they see in a leader versus for Gen X or boomers of us here, they used to be kind of at number 5. And so I think fundamentally, we will see more women leaders. We need to see them in all of the industries, because even if you see deal flow change, if you have 70-something% of media editors in the US who are male and 90% of them are male and white, you will not create the change. But I think ultimately the good news is that the entire landscape is shifting. With AI, the majority of jobs are going to be disrupted. We have massive reskilling ahead of us. And I think we have to just get a new chessboard. And the opportunity to do that is now. So I guess I'll leave you with, no matter how small of an idea, a good idea is still a good idea. So as you connect and you converse here, continue tomorrow and continue to innovate.
And ISIS, younger generations, technology, they kind of like come together and changing the pipeline. How do you think we can do that with this?
I think something that's encouraging, at least in the Africa and the Kenyan context, is that the conversations moved from, it's a level playing field. Women aren't just not showing up to, I think, especially in the last few years, and that's through a lot of advocacy, a lot of conversations, that a recognition that the approach to investing has to also change, right? It's not just enough to, like often people say, stop training us and just give us money, because there's a lot of training programs of different sorts, and that just give us the capital. And so I think what we're seeing is, that's very encouraging, is changing in the process of pipeline building. Meeting women where they are is something I hear again and again, particularly this year. So go to women networks, find ways to, I know some funds that are looking at specific criteria, right? And so they're saying, how are we sourcing deals, right? Let's look at that very closely. Instead of just warm leads, do we have a more kind of like, basic website application that everyone has to come through, right? So the trusted networks are not the only, because they and so I think that conversation's really shifted, and that's very encouraging, because it was not like that, 5 years ago. And I certainly agree in terms of not only entrepreneurs also looking for investors who look like them. So you see entrepreneurs like, oh, they don't invest in women. Why even bother? I'm not going to engage that fund, or I'm not going to. And having women on the investment committees who are bringing different types of networks and looking at opportunities differently in terms of how they approach the investment. So I think all of that is very encouraging right now. To your point, that I think over time you'll have more diverse founding teams. Yeah.
That's great. And our time is totally up. I want to thank you for the super insightful responses and comments. And I just want to add one more piece of data to the conversation, and is that the same studies that I mentioned before actually show that revenue from media organizations that are led by a more equitable group of people, men and women working together, actually make even higher revenue than those led by men. So I just want to leave that out there for you all. And thank you so much, lady, for this fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.